Hey y'all, I'm James Wright. Welcome to my shop. And Japanning, you know that black stuff that's on planes? Really kind of cool. But today we're going to hear from Greg Ricketts. He is one of the foremost experts on Japanning. And he recently gave a presentation at the MWTCA National Conference. And I got it recorded. So let's go take a look at what Greg has to say.
Let's welcome Greg Ricketts to our program today.
All right. So we'll go through a PowerPoint presentation I have on Japanning. I am not going to Japan a plane before your eyes because we don't have enough ventilation in here. So Japanning is got a lot of turpentine in it and definitely not suitable for a closed space. But the idea is to give you some of the background on Japanning, give you some information about mixing Japanning if you want to play around with it, mixing your own. If you don't want to mix your own, there's places you can buy it. And I sell it, there's other places as well. Go through how to apply it, how to cure it. Give you enough information that you could decide if you really wanted to fool around with Japan. Restoring an antique tool or any number of things. All this information I'm going to share is available on my website, aplanelife.us. It's not .com because I didn't have $20,000 to buy that from the guy that owns it. So it's .us, aplanelife.us. All that information's there. I've got articles on how to Japan. I've got recordings of seminars that I've done on Japanning that take you through everything from prepping a plane to Japanning it, heat curing it, mixing the Japanning, the whole thing, A to Z. Again, you don't need to take notes. You can find all this information later if you want to, but you're welcome to take notes. And I'll certainly take questions, kind of hold off maybe till we get through the presentation. But if it's really urgent or you have a terrible memory, finding what I mean. We'll just keep moving along. What about heckling? Heckling? Well, that's I've got the chief to deal with you then. So a little bit about myself. I am from Alexandria, Virginia. I lived there since 2009. I retired FAA. We can ask questions about that later too. I've been a hobbyist woodworker my whole life, but I'm not a furniture builder. I'm not a craftsman by any stretch. I consider myself a glorified carpenter at best, but I do love playing around with it. I am a bit of an antique hand plane collector. I've got well over 300 just being recorded, so I can't say the real number because my wife might see it. But they're all over the place. I do have a Facebook page, A Plane Life. The website, aplanelife.us, is where you'll find the information on Japanning. You'll also find other information there. I've got a research library there where any publications I've found on antique tools, things like that were difficult to find. Some I've scanned. I've got a book scanner. That information's there, so feel free to use that. If you're looking for information on an antique tool, you might find some of it on the website. I administer the Hand Planes Building, Restoring, and Collecting group that is Don Wilwall's Facebook group. I'm one of the administrators on that, and that keeps me busy with almost 50,000 folks there. If you're not a member of that group, it's a great place for information, great place for community expertise. You can post any question about a hand plane and you will get at least 100 answers. And then I started researching, testing, eventually manufacturing and teaching people how to restore the Japanning finish on their hand plane. I did that just before I retired from the FAA. So how did that come about? Well, I had a hand plane that was an heirloom tool that was in bad shape and some broken parts, and I went to replace those parts, found something online that looked like the right tool. I'll just scavenge parts off of it, so I ordered it and went to put those parts on my plane and found out there's more than one brand of hand plane. Who knew? And the parts are not all interchangeable, so I ordered another plane to salvage a part off of, and now it was part of a group of couple of planes, and these other planes showed up and still had the wrong part. 2 years later, I finally figured out what I had and got the replacement part. But by then I decided, well, it's an heirloom tool. I kind of like the way Grandpa broke it, so I never fixed it. But some of those other planes, I did decide I wanted to clean up and put to work, and they were in really sorry shape. When you pay $5 for 2 hand planes off eBay, they can be pretty rough. And so I heard about this Japanning, and I thought, well, I'd like to try to put this back to kind of original. What is that stuff? And man, it was really hard to find information about Japanning. So anyways, here's a little bit about the background. Japanning, as we know it on antique tools, is the same as Japan lacquerware. You've probably seen these jewelry boxes that are black with all kinds of colors, sometimes a lot of gold filigree on them, things like that. It's basically the same thing. It's a varnish with a pigment in it. That pigment on antique tools is typically asphaltum, also known as the brand name gilsonite when it comes from a mine in Utah. But a lot of local products were used in Japan. That was developed, they've got evidence of Japan wares going back 7,000 BCE in Japan. So they were Japanning woodwork and things thousands of years ago with local materials. Sap from local trees, pigment from local sources, probably lamp black if they were doing black. Lamp black is just the soot off of a poorly lit fire. Pretty easy to collect. It was used in all kinds of things. Obviously wood was the first. There you'll find leather that's been japanned. Tinware became real popular. It was a way to kind of waterproof tinware and make basically a canteen back in the day. And then cast iron, which came about later. Japan lacquerware became really popular in Europe in the 1600s. It became kind of the rage for the elites to have this wonderful, beautiful Japan lacquerware, the high gloss black with beautiful paintings on it. And then in the mid-1600s, Japan changed their kind of governance and became very isolationist and stopped exporting things. So the Japan lacquerware kind of disappeared when no longer readily available. It wasn't being imported into Europe. But the Italian artisans figured out a way to duplicate the process. They're using local products, a binding agent, linseed oil, pigments, and solvents. They started reproducing essentially Japan lacquerware, and they're the ones that named it Japani because it was representative of the lacquerware that came from Japan. So it was named after the country in a sense, right? So they called it Japani. It was in the 1700s that cast iron started to become a fairly common material for housewares, bed stands, furniture of various types. And of course, we all know cast iron just rusts like crazy. And you don't really want rusty cast iron around the house. So they were looking for ways to finish it and keep it from rusting and give it some durability and a decent look. And that's when they started experimenting with putting Japanning on cast iron. That really initially took place in Pontypool, Wales, which is part of the UK. You've maybe heard of Pontypool Japanning. There's a company in New York that sells Japanning by the name of Pontypool. That's why they use that name. Thomas Allgood in Pontypool was the first one to really start applying Japanning and heat curing it on cast iron. You don't heat cure Japanning when you're putting it on wood. We can talk about the differences in the process. I've done both. But he was the one that really kind of figured it all out and produced these real high quality, really durable finishes on Japan. It became very widespread. The Sunbeam bicycle is a famous example of Japanning. Sunbeams were made of steel, but would rust very bad. And so they japanned those bikes, and they were known for their really beautiful glossy finish that would reflect the sun. And when the wife of the owner commented on that, he decided to call it a Sunbeam. That was the name of the bicycle company, Sunbeam. Kitchenwares, like little tins for spices, were Japan. I recently found out that antique fans, we've all seen these old desk fans that were black. I never realized they were japanned until a guy ordered 20 cans of Japanning from me. And I said, okay, you don't need 20 cans of Japanning. Are you doing a car? And he said, no, I have a huge collection of antique fans, and I've been looking for this stuff. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Send me some pictures. So he was restoring antique fans. Early automobiles, the Model T was japanned. All the metalwork was heat-cured Japanning. The exterior woodwork was japanned and cured without heat. Again, I can tell you about the different process. But it was Japan. I didn't know this one, antique cameras. These really old cameras that you see that are black, they're made of brass and they're japanned. I had a camera collector contact me and ask me if Japanning would work on brass. And I said, well, yeah, it will, as a matter of fact, because I test all my Japanning on brass plates. These are just brass plated pieces of metal I have, and that just happens to be what I had around the shop, and it's what I put the Japanning on for each batch as I test it. And I said, it absolutely adheres fine. So he started restoring his antique cameras. I had no idea that those were Japan. Of course, bedpost in the upper right. One that a lot of people know about is Singer sewing machines. We've all seen these beautiful old Singer sewing machines. Those are Japan. It's an illustration of a big rack of Singer sewing machines, freshly japanned, either going in or coming out of a large walk-in oven. The Japanware was cured in very, very large ovens, prone to explosion. There were Stanley employees killed by explosions of Japanning ovens over the years. Antique scissors, the black handles on those scissors, japanned. Again, I didn't know that till a guy contacted me and bought Japanning. And I said, hey, send me some pictures of your antique tools, because I always love these pictures of hand planes. I got all these pictures of scissors. Like, well, there you go. I had no idea. And of course, planes are Japan, and that's what we really care about. But certainly, you find it in a lot of places. What's it made of? Back in the day, it was raw linseed oil. Today, we use boiled linseed oil. What's really the difference? Boiled linseed oil has additives to it to help it cure. Back in the day, they were working with raw linseed oil, and they were adding agents to help it cure, which was often Lafarge, which is a form of lead oxide, would be added. You'll find that listed in some of the old recipes of Japanning going back to the 1600s. Cobalt resonate was also a drying agent, maybe still used today. I'd have to look. Of course, local pigment, lamp black, is really common in Europe. Asphaltum is common in the States because we had a lot of it here. Asphaltum is found also in India. Malaysia and Indonesia have large sources of asphaltum, which is gilsonite, same thing. And then a solvent, typically turpentine, because it can be distilled from most local trees. The original Japan lacquerware was the distilled sap of a poison oak tree that's native to Japan. I'm sure that was a messy process figuring that out. Naphtha was also commonly used as a solvent. Naphtha is kind of a petroleum distillate, well it really is, but it was known back in ancient Rome. They used naphtha in lamps and things like that, so there were relatively natural sources of naphtha that they could find. So I want to learn about Japan and I want to figure out how to do it. There's not much information on the internet that I found. So I went to the College of Japanning, which was just keep digging. And so one of the first things I found was this 1688 Treatise of Japanning, which was great. It had a tremendous amount of information on all kinds of varnish finishes, but you virtually can't understand the language. All the chemicals, the ingredients were in terms that aren't in use anymore and haven't been in use in hundreds of years. So it took a little research to kind of figure out what they were talking about. And it's primarily based on wood Japanning, so different curing agents and things like that. But it did let me know that the basic ingredients that we've all heard of, which is, you know, asphaltum, turpentine, and linseed oil, we were on the right track. Also, another handbook of Japanning up here from 1913 had some information on it. What I really found that was useful after I'd been fooling around with it, making recipes and having some success, but still wondering how kind of accurate was this Automotive Industries publication from, I think it was the 1920s. There was an article published in there where a researcher went to, it might have been Ford Motor Company, and wrote articles about their Japanning process, which was great. They talked about how they applied the Japanning. They tried spraying it in some cases, which was really, really messy and explosive. They would, of course, immerse smaller parts in big vats of Japanning and then hang them and let it drip off. They would have conveyors that ran it under kind of constant flow nozzles of Japanning. So part would roll through there and the Japanning would kind of coat it. And in some cases, just a big old brush, slopping it on there. But it didn't help a lot with how they made the Japanning because they bought it all from other companies that made the Japanning at the time. So there were manufacturing companies that made Japanning as part of the varnishes that they produced. I wouldn't be surprised if Stanley Works was buying their Japanning from a manufacturer as well. But at least let me know, again, the heat curing process, I was pretty much on target with that. Application was understood. And then, so by this point, I was manufacturing Japanning. I was having very good success. I was pretty confident that we were on the right track, and we're basically reproducing the original finish on these planes that we're restoring. And then, just a couple of years ago, Gordon Addison reached out to me, a gentleman who was here last night presenting. And as you might have picked up on from his presentation, he got an invite to the Stanley, what do they call it? It's like a museum. It's the kind of the back room at the Stanley plant where a lot of the original tools and things like that are. And in there, he came across these drawings. They were the shop drawings that would be maintained down in the actual shop for reference for manufacturing Stanley bench planes. These were the pre-Type 9 bench planes, I think. At any rate, he sent me these images, and what he found on these, which was really interesting, is it talked about how they were Japanning the planes. Now, up until this point, I had believed that the body and the frog were completely dipped into the Japanning, allowed to drip off, and then put into the ovens. But I had always wondered, well, I can see how you can do it with the frog, but with the body, if you set it on a rack, you're going to weld it to the rack with the Japanning as you cure it. That Japanning is going to be between the sole of the plane and the rack, and you're going to be trying to pry those things off. So I thought, it's like, well, how would they hang them? There's no holes in it yet. It hasn't been machined. It's a raw casting. Well, this had the clue. The bottom of the plane, Japan, 2 brush coats. So they were simply taking the body of the plane and brushing the Japanning on the middle of the plane, covering the rails, running down the cheeks. Some of it maybe got on the sole, but that didn't matter because they're raw castings. They go to machining after they're japanned. So that was really great information. It does also talk about the frogs. They were dipped, and then dip and brush, it says. So dipped, used a brush to remove any like large puddles of Japanning before they went into the ovens. And 2 coats, which was good to know. So when you talk about restoring the Japan finish on a plane, I think it's important to keep in mind is we can't do it exactly the way they did it in the manufacturing process because we're not going to remachine the planes. So we're going to Japan around the machined areas of the plane. That would be the difference. The final result, I think, is exactly the same, but it's a little bit more tedious than just slopping on a whole bunch of Japanning and throwing it in an oven and then milling the cheeks and the sole and everything else. So, but the net result is the same. So that was great when I got that information from Gordon. It was really nice to have kind of the process confirmed and really understand how it was all done. So then, again, learning from experience, I played around with lots of different ratios. The basic ratio of Japanning is no big secret. It's basically 2 parts pigment, 2 parts solvent, and 1 part boiled linseed oil. Again, you don't want to use raw linseed oil. It will never cure. Boiled linseed oil. But that ratio can have some variability in it. There's a lot of learning and one of the big issues in Japanning that you can get, particularly if you make your own, is it can be gritty. You won't get the asphaltum won't fully dissolve. So then when you apply it to your plane and you cure it, you'll have all these little nibs in your finish. Keeping that out of your Japanning is one of the big challenges. I came up with various ways for people to filter their Japanning at home. The easiest way is just let it sit for a couple of months. All that undissolved material will go to the bottom of the can. As long as you never drop it or shake it or scrape the bottom of the can, it'll be fine. But if you're in a hurry, you're going to have to filter it. When I started manufacturing Japanning, obviously I wanted to try to provide the best product I could. So I developed filters, 200 micron filters that I could run the Japanning through, stainless steel filters to get all that material out so people get good results. I played around a lot with heat cycles. There was a video I found online. I think you guys may find this. I'm trying to remember. The guy was doing tinware, and I can't remember the name of the website. But he listed his curing cycle, and there were like 10 of them. You heat it to like 100 degrees and let it cool. Heat it to 150 for a couple hours and let it cool. And then 180, and it was a very lengthy process. Well, I started out that way, and I started thinking, can we do this a little faster? Because this is really slow. And I eventually boiled it down to 2 heat cycles. Initial curing cycle of about 180 to 190 degrees, and a final curing temp for 2 hours between 350 and 400. Hardens it off, you've got a rock hard finish that is basically permanently attached to your metal. So I was interested in trying to help people do this on their own. How can we make it simple? How can we make it efficient? I did try other alternatives. I did use Pontypool. There was a gentleman who had a can of Pontypool that he had never opened, and he said, I'd like to send it to you. I'm not going to mess with it. I said, I'd love to test it. So I did. It's a good product. It was exceptionally thick. I had to thin it down a good bit. I don't know what their mixture is. They don't publish any information about it, but it looked pretty much like any Japanning mix. So it's a perfectly good product. If you have it and haven't used it, by all means. You can cure it exactly the same way with everything I tell you today. Application, everything is the same. My only complaint with Pontypool is they only sell it in quarts, and it's about $100 a quart. And let me tell you, a quart of Japanning will do a large size automobile. All right? I sell Japanning in 1/4 pint cans. That will do at least 10 number 4 hand planes, at least. So you don't need a lifetime supply of Japanning. A quart of Japanning lasts forever. Yeah.
Have you tried most of the things that?
I have. The things that are up here, the rust seal, I was looking for other alternatives.
That was Port 15.
Port 15.
What your results were with that.
I have not used Port 15, but it is essentially the same product as rust seal. They're both urethane-based paints. And I will tell you that I think they are the best solution to a non-heat cured finish. So if you have a tool or an item that you can't heat cure or don't want to heat cure, or you just don't have access to any way to heat cure it, that is almost indistinguishable from Japanning on appearance. It self-levels, it's got the right viscosity to give the softening of the details. It's got the same finish. It adheres to the metal far better than spray enamel. Not quite as good as Japanning, but very close. It's very durable. So if I was going to restore maybe a Type 1 Stanley 45 or Type 2, you know, one of the Japan ones, I don't want to remove the wood handle because that's treacherous in itself. I would probably consider doing this. Although, you know, I can't want to be a traditionalist, but anyways, it's a good product. On both of those, read the instructions. When you open the can, it's curing immediately in the can. It's starting to cure right away. So you have to pour off what you're going to use, reseal the can, preferably with like argon gas or something, because it cures upon contact with oxygen. In half an hour, it's cured. And you can cure a whole can of it by the time you're done painting your plane. So read the instructions, but a good product. You know, I've used Rust-Oleum enamels or whatever, any spray enamels, and there's a good reason to use that. There are a lot of, well, certainly Miller's Falls. Miller's Falls never japanned their planes. They were all enamel from the beginning. They used obviously a very high quality, probably something like an automotive enamel that was baked on, because it's very tough, very durable, more durable than you'll get with a spray enamel. But you know, you can get a really good finish with a spray enamel if that's the way you want to go. And I have done that. I just wanted to get more traditional with the finish, is why I got into Japanning. But yeah, the rust seal or the Pore 15, good products, definitely. I've fooled around with the cold cure Japanning. If you do much research on the internet, you might find what they call cold cure recipes, where you mix asphaltum into an actual varnish. Really, really poor results. You get a very gritty finish because the asphaltum doesn't dissolve, it just stays in suspension, and it's got an incredibly narrow window of success. You get it on the slightest bit too thick and it just wrinkles up like you see on this picture in the bottom over here. You can see these, this will work here. You see these wrinkles down here? That's not a name in the casting, that's wrinkles in the finish, which you don't want. Yeah, I had no success, virtually no success with cold cure Japanning. It certainly was never going to be something I could recommend to people because it was just really difficult to be successful. I spoke with Mark Nickel about it one time. If you know Mark, he's a big number 1, number 2 plane collector, and he had fooled around with cold cure, and he got the exact same results and had the same frustration I had with it. Again, my target was to try to give as many people that are interested in it an opportunity to be successful if they wanted to Japan an antique tool. And I can tell you, I've sold hundreds and hundreds of cans of Japanning. I've done seminars on Japanning, and I have never had anybody have a bad outcome with it. I'm not kidding you. They all got finishes that honestly, I think everybody that buys the Japanning does a better job than I do. Because I see their pictures when they send them to me, and I'm like, can I send you my planes and you'll redo them? It seems to be a pretty certain process if you follow the directions. So. Yeah, it's the only time I had somebody that had a bad result, we talked about it a little bit and finally figured out that he had mixed his own Japanning and he had messed up the ratio. I thought he had bought Japanning and I was getting ready to send him some more, and turned out he had just mixed his own. And but we managed to sort it out and he finally got good results. So. Okay, yeah, but what about, well, if you want to mix your own Japanning, I'm just going to tell you, it can get a little messy. It can definitely get a little messy. I have Japanned a couple pairs of pants, a pair of shoes, my workbench top, my cabinets under my workbench, my floor, the wall once. So it can get messy if you're mixing it in pretty large quantities and you happen to drop it. So since
it hasn't been cured, isn't it easy to clean it up?
It is, yes, certainly turpentine will clean it up, but Japanning is a lot like, this is just pure gilsonite in here. I tell people that be careful with gilsonite, it's like copier toner. If a little bit gets out of the can, it just starts multiplying. Before you know it, it's everywhere. And Japanning's kind of the same way. Those times that I've spilled it, you get the paper towel and you wipe, and it looks like you just made more. And by the time you're done with the third or fourth roll of paper towels, you're finally making progress. So, but yeah, it's not gonna, except for clothes, it never comes out of clothes once it gets on there. Forget it. It never comes out. But you can get it off the floor. So one of the questions I get sometimes about mixing is measuring the ratio, weight versus volume. Well, certainly by weight is the most accurate measure, because if you're measuring a solid, the powder, by volume, it kind of depends on how much it's packed. But asphaltum is so light, it really is like copier toner. I tried mixing it by weight, and I just, a gram difference would make or break an entire mixture. So I have always measured by volume. All the directions I give are by volume. And again, we've got a lot of success with people mixing their own when I give them the directions. Whether they use the gilsonite that I provide in small quantities or whether they source it elsewhere. There's lots of places you can get it in this country. I just definitely recommend measuring by volume. It's not that hard. Here's one I get sometimes. Well, I live in California. I can't get real turpentine. They have turpentine substitute. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. Sorry. If you're in California and you want to make your own Japanning, drive across the border to Nevada, mix it up, drive home. But you can't get naphtha there. You can't get the solvents that are going to work. There's a few other states. So it's really county by county that there's bans. It's not the whole state, but at any rate, you got to have either genuine turpentine, which I recommend, or genuine naphtha. It doesn't need to be expensive turpentine. We'll talk about that in a minute. Well, I don't really have a way to heat it. Can I just cure it at room temperature? Yeah, I think maybe in 2 or 3 years, it'll probably harden off. But I have let it sit for 30 days, and it still wasn't a hard finish. You could still stick your thumbnail in it, which is inadequate. We want a good finish. It is heat cured on metal. Now, we'll talk a little bit about putting in the oven in the house and what happens to your marriage if you do that. But there are alternative ways to do it, heat curing. And you probably have access to some of these pretty simple alternatives. Doing what I call staying in the flight envelope, right? Japanning is pretty forgiving substance. It's pretty forgiving to mix. It's pretty forgiving to cure, to apply and cure. It's pretty forgiving to use as long as you stay within this fairly wide range of performance of how you do it, right? You don't have to measure by the micron how thick you're putting it on. You don't have to worry if your oven is 25 degrees too hot, things like that. But if you put it in the oven and you set it on broil instead of bake, it's probably not going to work. So you got to stay within what I call the flight envelope, which is the information I provide about it. This is a great color. Get it all the time. Great question. How about Japanning in different colors? Well, we know in the hand plane world, red, right? Ohio Tool Company had red Japanning on their planes, which did not hold up very well. Rodier offered red Japanning, which I didn't know until recently. So yes, you can use any pigment in Japanning. Obviously, when they were doing Japanning lacquerware on wood, you see a lot of different colors. The challenge to it is that the commercial pigments you'll buy, other than asphaltum, don't dissolve in the solvent. They go into suspension. So they're little particles floating around, which again can cause a rough finish, a sandpaper-like finish. They're just not finely ground enough. But you can regrind the pigments fine enough to do Japanning with it. If you have a friend that's an artist that paints in oils and they mix their own paints, they can show you exactly how to do it because that's what they do all the time. It's molding. They use a glass mortar and a piece of plate glass, a little bit of linseed oil with the pigment, and grind it on a piece of glass between basically 2 pieces of glass. You can grind that fine enough that the suspension of the particles won't be a problem in the finish. So you can Japan really in any color if you're willing to grind the Japanning. The original red Japanning was a different material. I believe what Ohio used, I can't confirm this, was a common red pigment of the time, which I have some of here. somewhere. Oh, it's in here, I think. I tried to put it someplace safe. It's cinnabar, which is mercury oxide. So I think just like the hat makers of old that went crazy from exposure to mercury, I suspect the folks that were mixing red Japanning might have had neurological problems. Because mercury oxide, as you can see, toxic material, it's sealed. But that is the product I believe they were using for their red pigment on the Ohio plains. I've mixed it, the color is right. It seems to match better than I've used iron oxide, which was a common pigment, basically rust. And some of the modern cobalt reds, which were close to the period that Ohio was Japanning in red, could have been used, but the colors are not even close. So I believe that's what they used. If you have a plane that you want to Japan in red, don't go traditional. Don't do this. First of all, that's like $300 worth of pigment right there. It's ridiculously expensive, and it's really not something you want to fool with. Choose a different product if you want to do red. Or you can buy modern cobalt pigments and mold them like at any artist supply store. If you mull it down fine enough, it'll work. Oh, this is a great question. I get this all the time. How can I just touch up the Japanning? I've got a spot on the plane that it got chipped or it rusted. Can I spot repair it? You can, but it's more work than stripping and re-Japanning the entire plane. It's very difficult to end up without that chip and the edges of it shadowing through, casting through the Japanning as you re-Japan over it. You have to build it up, sand it down, build it up, sand it down, polish the whole surface. I've done it. It's a tremendous amount of work. Very difficult to get good results. So I tell people generally, I wouldn't recommend it. If you really want to restore the finish, then remove the finish and restore the whole finish. You'll be happier in the end. So let's get down to some of the nitty gritty of actually mixing Japanning. Again, asphaltum or gilsonite. I sell it in real small quantities if you want to fool around with a can. This will make a can of Japanning. You can also buy it at a lot of artist supply stores. There's an art supply manufacturer called Rublev, R-U-B-L-E-V, and they sell gilsonite or asphaltum. I think they call it gilsonite. Ted, do you remember?
I'm pretty sure that was asphalt.
Asphaltum, okay, so they're branding it as asphaltum. It comes in a can about twice this big, which is probably almost a lifetime supply for most of you. It's very high quality, works great, and it's well priced. It is occasionally available in Canada and in England and in Australia, but lately it seems to have disappeared, so I've been shipping gilsonite to those folks. And then turpentine, again, or linseed oil. You definitely want boiled linseed oil. Now, I use pure gum spirits of turpentine. What is that versus, the turpentine in the big box store? The pure gum spirits is harvested like maple syrup, right? They're still cutting trees in the South, and they're leaking off the sap and distilling it and all that. The rest of this is taken from wood pulp, wood manufacturers, lumber yards. They take the wood pulp and they basically just distill the turpentine out of it. It makes no difference. I've made Japanning out of both. There is no difference. The reason I use the pure gum spirits is I can get it in much larger quantities at a better price. But I've made Japanning out of both. You can certainly go to Home Depot, pick up a can of pure gum spirits of turpentine. Don't buy turpentine substitute, and you can make your own Japanning with it. It works fine. Boiled linseed oil. You can buy it at the big box store. It works fine. You don't have to have some exotic, brand. Rublev sells an artist's boiled linseed oil, and I think it's about 10 times more expensive, and it makes no difference. So, and then the gilsonite, like I said, Rublev, you see the name here. There's a gentleman on eBay that sells gilsonite. He sells it in larger quantity. Well, he used to sell it only in like a pound and more, which is a lot of Japanning. I do buy mine from him. I buy it in much larger quantities. But you can buy direct from him on eBay. If you just do a search on eBay for gilsonite, you'll find his name. He's reputable. So mixing it yourself is certainly an option. I would never discourage anybody that wants to play around with it. Just do it someplace you can make a mess. You'll need measuring cups, measuring spoons, snatch the teaspoon out of the mom's or your wife's cabinet, Make sure you clean it before you put it back. I recommend wearing gloves. You get the stuff on your hands and you're basically dyed for about a week until it wears off. Turpentine, pretty high VOC. You definitely want to have some ventilation. When I'm mixing large quantities, I mix it in gallon quantities. I usually mix 3 or 4 gallons at a time. I'll wear a good filter respirator just because my shop doesn't have that great of ventilation. And so just, your safety is your business. I wear protective glasses. I don't want to get turpentine in my eyes. And then be prepared to do a lot of stirring. Process matters. It really does. So we'll get into some nitty-gritty, like I said. If you're going to mix your own Japanning, again, if you buy the gilsonite from me, the instructions are on the back. I send you an email link to much more detailed instructions. But I'll tell you right now, you want to mix the solvent and the pigment together first. You want to mix the asphaltum and the turpentine together first. Add it basically in even ratio. Or a little heavy on the gilsonite, a little light on the turpentine. You want to end up with a thick mixture of pigment and solvent. If it's too thin, you're in a lot of trouble, kind of unrecoverable. But if it's too thick, you just keep adding turpentine to it in small quantities and re-stirring and let it sit for a few hours or a day. Next day, stir it up again and check until you get the right viscosity. You never want the Japanning to be too thin. Once it gets too thin, you're going to be putting 10 coats of Japanning on your plane and you're never going to want to do it again, right? So, and we'll talk about how thick is the right thickness. But you want to mix the solvent and the turpentine together first. You stir it a lot. I would say if you're mixing in one of these cans, like 5 minutes in here with a stir stick. You see I mix mine with a custom paddle I've designed. Stir the entire thing and get out of control and sling Japanning everywhere at times. And then you let it sit for 24 hours. And it'll be really watery. You'll think you've blown it. You think, oh my gosh, I've ruined it. It's like water. It's like turpentine. You let it sit 24 hours, you come back, and you can stand a spoon up in it. It'll thicken overnight. As that asphaltum actually goes into solution. It'll get much, much thicker. And then you'll just start thinning it down until you get to something that's about a little thinner than honey, or warm honey, is what you're looking for. I actually measure viscosity. There's a thing called a Han cup that you can measure viscosity of liquids, so I test it to make sure I'm in the right range when I mix it.
Down with the boiled linseed oil or with more turpentine?
You're going to thin it only with turpentine. Until you get that mixture right, you don't want to add the linseed oil. Because once you add the linseed oil, your turpentine will no longer act like a solvent. And you won't be able to...
And you wait another day?
Yeah, you wait, you stir it up until you get the consistency you want after 24 hours, right? It's sat for 24 hours, you come back, you stir it, you go, yep, that looks about right. It looks like a little bit thinner than honey or just about like honey. At that point, you'll add the linseed oil and you're good to go.
You said when you chip it, when you just have a chip. Well, it's much easier just to strip the Japanning off, but you didn't say anything about that. It can't be that easy to do, is it?
We'll talk about it. I'll give you some tips on how to do it, yeah. It can be pretty, every once in a while I'll run into a plane that the Japanning is bonded on there like none other. Really hard to get off, but most of the time it's pretty easy to get off if you have it out the right way. So again, you want to get the pigment and the turpentine mixed at the right viscosity, the right thickness, again, just about like honey, slightly thinner than honey, and then you'll add the final ratio of linseed oil. If you add the linseed oil before that, it's really hard to end up with a good product. So that's my best tip for you when mixing it. Let's talk a little bit about BLO. If you didn't know this, is my safety tip, James knows this, boiled linseed oil on rags will spontaneously combust. So now the Japanning won't. It doesn't have enough linseed oil in it. It's got too much solvent. I've fooled around with it. You can almost not ignite it. It's almost fireproof. But if you're cleaning up spilled linseed oil and you throw those rags in your trash can, you're going to burn your shop down. It's really easy to do. That is actually a fire at the house that was behind my old home where I used to live. They had people in there refinishing a floor. They had stained the floor, and the stain had linseed oil in it. They threw all the rags in the trash can on the back porch, the workers, and all the cardboard from all the appliances they had just installed were next to the trash can. And I'm out back barbecuing, and I hear this sound like someone's popping popcorn. I turn around, I see a column of smoke and flames. And $250,000 of damage was done to 2 homes before the fire department got there. That trash can ignited the cardboard, ignited the back porch of one house, it spread to the next house. Fortunately, the fire department got there fast and put it out. But and James, I think you have a video on this where you took some linseed oil rags and wanted to see, is this really true? And he put them in his fire pit. Sunny day. It didn't take long before they started smoking, did it?
2 hours.
2 hours. Yeah. So self-polymerizing oils, in a lot of the finishes you use in woodworking, be careful with them because they can spontaneously combust. One of the other challenges, again, I talked about, if your mixture is too thick, well, that's not so bad. You can thin it down, just add more turpentine, stir, wait 24 hours, check it the next day. If your mixture is too thin, you're probably going to start over. It's really hard to recover. You can't add more asphaltum because you're losing the solvent power of the turpentine, right? And so if you're just a little too thin and you add more asphaltum, it will never go into solution. It will stay a suspended particle in there, and you'll have very rough finish on your plane. About all you can do is mix up another batch, maybe smaller, that's really thick, and then put the two together to get the right viscosity. I have done that. I mixed a gallon about 6 months ago, got interrupted, screwed up the ratio. I had very thin Japanning, so I had to divide that up between several other gallons to get to the right viscosity. And again, turpentine substitute, as far as I know, it just doesn't work. I've tried it. I haven't tried every brand, but it didn't work. It didn't dissolve the asphaltum, it just stayed in suspension. So plane preparation, you're asking about it. How do I prepare a plane? I think the most important thing when you're going to redo a plane is take some really good pictures of it first. Because you'll be surprised once you strip it and you start Japanning, you'll be going, oh, was there Japanning on this piece? Was that Japan? What about the mouth plate underneath the, what part of that was Japan? I don't remember. And so now you're really not getting the plane restored back to its original condition, right? So take some good detailed pictures, so if you can't remember where the Japanning goes, you have a reference, right? And I'll, just for a brief moment, I'll talk about the cheek rails, which are these edges right here, right? There's some interesting debate about whether the cheek rails were japanned. Well, the answer is yes and no. They are japanned at the factory. Remember, they're just taking a big old brush because they're doing hundreds of castings, and they're throwing a pretty heavy layer of japanning on this thing as a raw casting, just the body, right here. Big brush, japanning. It's running down the sides. It's not in the holes because they're not there, but it's on every surface. It's on the cheek rails, right? Goes in the oven, gets cured, off to the machine shop it goes. Well, the early Stanley planes and some of the really early Sargent planes, the cheek rails are rounded. They're rounded over. Later on, they started doing a process called linishing, basically taking the body and running it against a belt sander to flatten out the top of the rails. I think they did that because some of the castings I've seen, it's not uncommon to get small pock marks in the rails of raw castings, and those might be a reject. But if they remove just a little bit of that rail on a linishing process, then they can salvage more castings and have less waste, right? So you'll see the type, I think it's around type 5. No, it's later than that. It's type 7 or 8. You'll see the rails flattened off. So when they did that, they removed the japanning. Prior to that, they were japanned. But it's hard to find because this is the edge that gets hit by everything. So it's frequently chipped off. But if you look really close at a good condition, older Stanley plane, you'll often see that some of the japanning is still on the rail. So kind of depends on the era of your plane. But do take good photographs. Again, note the rails, the mouth, the cross pins, things like that. We'll talk, I guess, we'll talk about this in the application process, about the pins. Stripping it. Okay, so how do you strip a plane? I strip them mechanically. I have a big sandblaster, big compressor, vent system for it, all that stuff. Sandblasting gets it off real quick. It's kind of fun. It's like magic watching stuff disappear. It's fun to take rust off things with a sandblaster. And if you use glass bead media, you cannot hurt the casting. I've taken that sandblaster and just tried to drill a hole in a casting with glass bead media. It doesn't do anything to it. Now, if you use aluminum oxide or garnet, you better be a little more careful. You could soften the lettering on a casting. You could start to remove material. But glass bead media is perfectly fine. Walnut shells probably won't remove the japanning or take a really long time. But most people don't have a media blaster. Citrus strip is a great way to remove japanning. I did not discover this. It's MMSI Toolworks. I can't remember his name. You'll see it at the end of the presentation. he started Japanning planes, helped him get started, and then he really enjoyed it, and so he does planes for clients. He does commissioning Japanning now. Nate at MMSI Toolworks. And Nate told me that he was having really good success with citrus strip. It's a simple product available in your big box stores. The key is you want to put it on fairly heavy and then wrap the plane in plastic, whether you put it in a tight-fitting garbage bag and wrap it up, or wrap it up in saran wrap, which is what he does, and let it sit, preferably overnight. You want that citrus strip to still be wet when you unwrap it, and it will soften that Japanning to where it will come off, at worst with a plastic scraper, mostly with a stiff plastic brush, like a toothbrush, a stiff toothbrush, will take the Japanning off with citrus strip. I have used these like Jasco, like aircraft strippers, and they'll work, but they're really nasty chemicals. The citrus strip is not a very harsh chemical. It's something that's much safer to use. Other than that, I used to recommend for folks that didn't have access to a media blaster that they could soak the plane for about 48 hours in lacquer thinner, and it will soften the Japanning and it'll blister up and come off. But again, a much harsher chemical and not as effective as citrus strip. So if you want to strip one and you don't have access to a media blaster, that's the way to go. It works quite well. Temperature, we mentioned temperature up here. That's more of the application process. You want your Japanning to always be at least 72 degrees, preferably about 78. You want to have your environment where you're applying it in that temperature range, because if it's too cold, the Japanning will not level out. If you know what self-leveling is, it's how brush strokes go away, right? And Japanning has really good self-leveling characteristics. So when you brush it on and you get all these brush marks, you don't need to worry about them at all. Because within a few minutes, that paint will relax and it'll just be glossy smooth, right? If it's at least 72 degrees. I Japanned a plane at 68. It was a mess. I had to start over. So, yeah, for some of you, that means you're going to Japan in the summer. Can you warm the Japanning and warm the body of the plane? Yes, you can. Don't get it too hot. If you could have a good way to heat it to about 80 degrees and, you know, like keep it on your coffee warmer, yeah, that would probably work. But you're going to want it to stay warm for about 15 minutes so it can level out once it's applied. But the real key is just don't do it in the cold weather. Oops, here we go. Oh, I had a little video there I forgot about. That's okay. So application, how do you put this stuff on? Again, we talked about the difference between how it was done at the manufacturer and how we do it when we restore, all right? It's not exactly the same. It's the same outcome, it's the same product, but you're not going to remill your plane unless your name's Tom Dickey. Tom Dickey would probably remill the plane just for fun. But, so you're going to apply it around where the frog makes contact. You're not going to put it in the holes where the screws go. You're not going to put it on the sole of the plane or let it run down the cheeks. If it does, just wipe it off the turpentine before it cures. So there's a little bit of difference. Again, the key is temperature. Don't apply it if it's cold. That's a real mess. You will have to strip the plane down, start over. You want to work in a dust-free environment. It's really sticky. Early on, the second plane I did, I was still sorting out the heat curing process, and at that point the recommendation was to apply the Japanning and let it sit for at least a few hours to relax before you started heat curing it. Well, I was kind of the end of the day, and I thought, well, I'll just let it sit overnight. So I did, and the next day I got up, went out there, and it's like, oh, I got this other project I'm working on. Ran the table saw. Guess what the Japanning looked like? Even though I've got like a big central vac system, it's not perfect. Yeah, it has a nice coat of sawdust on that plane because it was sitting out in the open. So be dust-free. If you're going to let the plane sit for a few minutes before you heat cure it, just put it in the oven. It's a pretty dust-free environment. Put it in the oven, let it sit for 15 minutes before you start heating it up. Use quality brushes. Even though the brush strokes are not really much of an issue, you don't want to use those really cheap chemical brushes. I use artist brushes. First of all, they just lay on a really nice coat. They hold the Japanning well. You can get them extremely fine, like 3 or 4 hairs, so you can get in some really tight spaces, like around the lateral adjustment lever, if you don't want to remove it, which I don't recommend. You guys are welcome to take a look at what these are. I'll start out here, what these brushes look like. They're not expensive. You can get a set of them for $10 off Amazon or at your local artist store, but use a good quality brush. Get some lint-free rags. if you use paper towels around there, they're always shedding little fibers, and they'll find your way into your finish. So have a few rags around, because you're gonna get some Japanning where you don't want it. You're gonna put a little turpentine on the rag and just wipe it off before you cure it. So that's not a big deal. Have some turpentine handy, because you will, inevitably you'll get it somewhere you don't want it. I've gotten it on my face before, yeah. The turpentine will take it off, it's not good for your complexion. I do recommend gloves for 2 reasons. One, it's a mess on your hands. It's like any paint. But number 2 is you don't want to be getting a bunch of fingerprints all over your hand plane, right? You'll start promoting rust on your plane while you're working. Dropping Japanning, yeah, just don't do it. Don't drop it. I've done it, don't do it. So actually coating the plane. You start out with, I recommend typically 3 to 4 coats of Japanning to get a really good finish. This plane has 3 coats on it, and I'll pass this around. This is just an old body. From the bridge here to, you can see it on here, right about the patent dates, there's 1 coat of Japanning, and then the next couple inches is 2, and the back end has 3 coats, so you can kind of see what the finish would look like. The first coat is what I call a brown coat. Pardon?
This has or has not been cured.
That's been cured. Yeah, it's been cured. I call it a brown coat because you want to put it on thin enough that it almost looks kind of brown, not black. That just seems to give better adhesion. It seems to, you get less run, any kind of runs or sags on the second coat. It just seems to be the best practice. I guess I can't really tell you why, but I've done lots and lots and lots of planes, and it works really well. So you first coat very thin, you go through the whole cure process. Put the second coat on a little heavier. At that point, you want to start getting that nice glossy smooth finish. You got to put it on heavy enough that it self-levels. How heavy is that? It's like putting on 2 coats of spray paint at once. If you can imagine you sprayed something twice, you're brushing on about that thickness. Yes?
Do you tape off?
Nope, don't tape off anything. Yeah, that's a major plus. When I started spray painting planes originally to clean them up, I hated taping. But the Japanning is thick enough, it doesn't run. And so you can kind of push it with your brush or brush, away from your surfaces. And yeah, you don't have to mask off anything. Brush right up against the surfaces. And again, if you just happen to go a little bit over, your rag and your finger and just a dab of turpentine will wipe right off before you cure it.
You probably said that I wasn't paying attention. Do you cure between coats?
Yes. Yes, every coat goes through a curing process, which is a total of 4 hours. 2 hours at about 190, and 2 hours at about 400 degrees.
You do a bunch of planes at one time?
It depends on how many I have going. I'll do 4 or 5, but originally I had a little toaster oven, a little Black & Decker toaster oven about this big. If you buy the right one, you can get a number 5 in it, or a number 6. You can get a number 6 in it. Yeah, you can get an 18-inch diagonal if you get just the right pizza oven. And it works great. Those of you that know me know that I eventually wanted to do bigger planes, so I bought another one, the same oven, and I disassembled them and reassembled the boxes and made one that was twice as wide. I helped Ted do that in Guam with a series of phone calls at 1 in the morning for me while he was going through this. And I published an article on how you could do it. I don't really recommend it because the heating element struggles you'll burn out your heating element in about 6 months.
That was the hard part.
The heating element, yeah. I eventually just, got a scratch and dent wall oven and put it in my shop. And I know James cures his planes in the oven in the house, which you can do. It doesn't do any damage to the onion or the oven. I've done it, and I still bake cookies in there. It's no big deal, but it does smell like turpentine in your house for about 2 hours. But one of the easiest things that I've been recommending to people lately that want to do a larger plane, don't have a little oven they can do it in, is a gas barbecue grill. You can absolutely cure Japanning on your gas barbecue grill. I have done it with my Bedrock number 8 because the guy told me he tried it and it worked. So I thought, well, I better learn how. And it's pretty simple. All you need is a good thermometer and a Sharpie, and go out there and figure out where the knobs need to be set and mark them for about 190 degrees, and then figure out where they need to be set for 400 degrees and mark it on your grill so you can set it, and then put a cookie sheet in there first and set your plane on the cookie sheet. Because you don't want that direct heat off the burners, you want it to disperse. And I threw my Bedrock number 8 in there and did the whole Japan process, and it came out just great. So, good thermometer and a Sharpie. So, that makes it a lot more accessible to folks that want to do larger planes. If you're gonna just do a bunch of smaller planes, get a small toaster oven, it's really convenient. It's less cost than running your gas grill.
Are there telltale signs? Can you, as a guy who does this all the time, walk that floor and pick out the planes that someone's Japan?
I can't tell one that's been re-Japanned. No, I know a few places you could look and maybe tell. I can certainly tell if they've been sprayed. I can tell if they've been spray painted or brush enamel. I can sometimes tell the difference between Japanning and powder coating. All your modern planes, Lee Nielsen, Lee Valley, I don't know about all the ones coming from India and stuff, but I suspect they're all powder coated. And powder coating is a great finish. It's just not really readily accessible to the home handyman. You can get, I have powder coated. I used to powder coat automotive parts at home, but a hand plane's a little bit more difficult. You have these really narrow spaces between pieces of metal, and you get what's called the Faraday effect. So you're trying to get powder coat on it, and it's just repelling away. You have to have some pretty specialized equipment to do it at home. You can do it, it's an investment. But powder coating is great. It's very environmentally friendly. They reclaim the powder that doesn't stick to the plane and reuse it. It's a really short heat cycle. It's 10 to 15 minutes, and it's really durable. It's as durable as Japanning. So yeah, powder coating. If you have a powder coater in your area and you want to take your planes to them, you know, you're going to get a great finish. It's going to be virtually indistinguishable from the Japanning. If you want to know that you did it traditionally, Japan it. If you just want it to look like it was done traditionally, but you don't want to put all the effort in, powder coating is a great way to go, as are the urethane paints.
So the Faraday effect makes it appear to have a slight crack in it after it cures?
No, you just can't. So the way powder coating works is you put basically a negative charge on the metal object, or positive, I think it's negative. It's grounded, and your powder, as it comes out, is positively charged, so it attracts and sticks. But in the Faraday effect, you get these small areas where the field, the electrical field, is repelled. And so the powder just won't go there. It just deflects off, and it won't get in between. Particularly, the one that was the biggest problem, a friend of mine does powder coating for planes that he restores. He's got a very expensive setup. He was redoing an X-plane, Union X-plane, and it's got those vertical like frog pieces, and they're very close to the cheek, and he could not get the powder to adhere in there. Until he spent a lot more money. And then he was able to do it. So, a commercial powder coating place can do it. Their equipment is going to be of the type that can overcome the Faraday effect. So if you want to have a plain powder coat, you certainly can do it. Let's see. So we talked about the brown coat. A very thin first coat, go through the heat curing cycle, and then a little heavier coat the next time. You know, not too light. You don't want to be too light. If you're too thin with your Japanning, you'll never get that nice flow, and you'll start to build up brush strokes. If you go too heavy, it can kind of sag and run into the corners, and you'll get potentially wrinkling, but you'll get kind of areas where you're kind of like a fillet of glue in the corner. What's too thin and what's too thick? It's a pretty wide envelope, okay? You don't have to fret it too much. Again, if you put it on like you're putting on a coat of latex paint on a piece of nice wood, you'll be fine. If you put it on like maybe a couple of coats of spray paint, it's going to flow out fine. It's not going to sag. It's not that critical. And again, 3 coats. Some if you're doing, you know, it kind of just depends on how each coat goes. A lot of times 3 coats will give you the look you want, and you've got a great finish. Sometimes it's 4 coats. Japanning on a lot of things, particularly in the automotive industry, was sanded between coats to further smooth out the material. And you can absolutely do that. Japanning is a great sandable primer. So if you've got a rough casting, Ohio planes are sometimes really rough castings. It's like they use pebbles instead of sand. I have smoothed those out by doing a couple coats of Japanning and taking like 600 or 800 grit sandpaper and into your finger or whatever and sand it all down. You get back to kind of a brown coat, and you'll see the areas filling in, and go from there, and you'll get a really nice satin smooth finish. So you can certainly sand it between coats and then put a final coat over it. We talked about, you know what parts of the plane you want to Japan. Let's talk a little bit about the lateral lever. If you look at the frog of a plane, there is Japanning all around the lateral lever. This is an older Stanley, but this little casting indent here is Japanned in there. And it's really hard to get to. Really hard to get to. Obviously, it was Japan before the lateral lever was put on. But removing and reinstalling the lateral lever is a risky proposition. It's real easy to snap the top of your frog off when you go to pound that rivet out, all right? I don't recommend it. I recommend that really fine artist brush that's going around. It comes to an incredibly fine point, and you can get in underneath that lateral lever, and you can Japan that on one side, swing the lever over, Japan end to the other. You'll probably get a little Japaning on the lateral lever, and you just wipe it off with turpentine, and you're fine. I think it's a much less risky way to go instead of risking your casting to just Japan around the lateral lever. The other one is the Y-yoke, right? The pin of the Y-yoke is not Japanned. It went in after the Japanning process. You can remove the pin fairly easily, but it is still a risk. You can break one of these tabs off your frog, and now you've ruined your frog. So again, you can Japan the Y-yoke and not worry about the Japanning that gets on the pin. Right? The yoke will be a little stiff until you grab it and swing it back and forth a few times, and it'll loosen right up, and the Japanning will wear off that yoke. So again, I probably would not remove the Y-yoke unless you had it off for some other reason. I wouldn't remove it to Japan it. I would Japan with the yoke in place on the frog. I just think it's less risky, but it's up to you. The Y-yoke is certainly a lot easier to get off and reinstall than the lateral lever. If you've never installed a lateral lever, use great caution. So that kind of covers that part of Japanning the plane. On planes with like mouth plates and such, again, as long as you know where you're Japanning, by taking some photographs before, there's really no hazards in there at all. And it's kind of fun to Japan inside those little recesses. It looks really good when it's done. We'll pass these. In fact, I can pass these around now if you guys want to look at them. Be careful, these are my user planes and they're sharp. So I've got the blade retracted, but if you pull the cap off and pull the blade out, it's your own thumb. I'll pass this one around as well. This is a number 4 Stanley. I think it's a type 6 or 7 that I Japanned. If you guys, sure, yeah, because that cap's plated anyway. So. That plane was, the restoration work on that number 4 was done by Mark Webster, if you guys know him. He does an amazing job. He doesn't call it restoration, he calls it refurbishment, because he does powder coat them when they're done. He tries to put the plane in the best working condition it can be in and make it look really, really nice, but he's not traditional necessarily in how he does it. But I love his work, and his planes work incredible. But I Japanned that. He doesn't powder coat mine, he sends them back raw and I Japan them. So yeah, that's applying it. Here you can see this is a clip from I've done a few seminars online on Japanning, where I just kind of walk people through it. It's not much different than what we're doing here today, other than I'm actually Japanning the plane before your eyes. But you'll see here just a minute, you'll kind of see the brush coat going on. You can see it takes very, very little Japanning on your brush. You're not dipping that brush in there, you're just getting the tip of the brush in there at this point. We'll let it run for a second.
You have a favorite glove to use?
No, whatever fits. None of them seem to last very long. I don't think I ever get all the way through without tearing a glove. So I don't know if you can tell, I mean, I probably got 2 drops of Japanning on that brush, and I just did a square inch on that first coat. So the first coat's thin, it's a little brownish cast. It's not going to be jet black. If it's not jet black, you got it perfect. So, and you can see none of it's masked, and I just brush. If you brush towards the surface, like on the frog, if I pull up on the back of the frog seat, then I won't get Japanning on the frog seat itself. Now you can see me going, if I brush down the other way, I'd get Japanning all over the cheek rail right there. But by brushing up, I'm getting little to no Japanning on the cheek rail. Before I cure it, I will take that rag with turpentine and just rub the cheek rail to clean it off right before I throw it in the oven. But, it's a quick process to get a coat of Japanning on there. It only takes 10 minutes. You will spend a total of 4 hours curing it. 2 hours at 190, 2 hours at 400. You can easily do a coat a day. You can do 2 a day if you want. Don't grab it right out of the oven. They're really hot. Yes, I did do that. Heat curing equipment. Like I said, that's a Black & Decker toaster oven that I bought off of eBay when I started doing this right here. And it would hold a number 6 plane just barely. It's kind of deep in the back. It's kind of bowed out for like a pizza. Came with a little plate that would go in there. You could put a small pizza in it. And it worked great. This is the same oven right here with half of another oven attached to it over here. Same oven, I just salvaged parts of it and extended the heating elements, blended them together, all this kind of stuff. I put a digital thermometer on it, and I was curing, there's a number 7 that was in there. And that worked great. I used that for about 8 months, and then I burned the heating element out of it. And then I decided I just wanted to go whole hog, and I bought a scratch and dent oven, and it's installed in my shop. But again, gas grill works. There has been at least one gentleman that cured his plane in like a electric skillet. I haven't tried this. I've read about it, and this one guy told me he did it and it worked fine. But it's apparently like about 4 or 5 inches deep. Kind of a common household appliance, maybe not so common anymore. But you just set the plane in there, and it's got a thermostatically controlled heating element, electric element underneath it, and put the lid on it. And he said it worked fine. They're not big. I mean, number 4 plane or a number 3 plane would fit in it. So that's another option. We've talked about the heat curing cycle. Again, I talk a lot about the envelope of success. Can you cure at different temperatures? Yes. I used to recommend 350 degrees, but that is the lower limit at which the Japaning will really harden off. And quite often, folks were having to do multiple cycles at 350. I tried to stay low on the heat spectrum just because of any risk to the castings. But keep in mind, that casting, when Stanley or Sargent, whoever made it, when they Japanned it, they ran it about 450 to 500 degrees in their oven. So it's already been annealed once after it came out of the foundry. It shouldn't have any stress in it. I've never had one warp. But you know, why run hotter than you have to? So I now recommend 400. At 400 degrees, 2 hours, you get a rock hard finish.
Most kitchen oven thermostats are 20 to 40 degrees off.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, you definitely get you can get a nice digital thermostat for like 15 bucks now off Amazon. Probe goes in the oven. Piece sits out there with an alarm on it. If it gets too hot, it'll alert you. You know, it's pretty easy. But yeah, I think some other thermostat or a thermometer other than what your oven came with is not a bad idea.
Are these electric ovens or gas? Does it matter?
You can use gas. The one I cured at that I baked cookies in later was gas. The one thing I did find with a gas oven is if it's recommended you want to put a tool in the oven before you turn the oven on, because you want it to heat up a little slower. You don't want to have an oven at 400 degrees and throw your cold casting in there, okay? But what I did find with gas is if you put it in there before you light the gas, when it first lights, there's a whole bunch of oxygen or moisture gets burned out of the air, right? And so the plain Japaning was great, and it was coated with a lovely layer of rust everywhere I'd cleaned it. So I had to polish the rust. It was a light layer, but I had to polish the rust off. So I found out afterwards, if you're using gas, light it first, let it go for just a couple minutes, and then put the plane in. It might be 100 degrees at that point, but it's not 400 degrees. You're fine. So you can do it in gas, yeah. I think electric is simpler. Again, slow heating, you want to always put the plane in before you start the heat cycle if you can, except in gas. So, not a big issue with the gas grill because it's got a lot of it's circulating a lot of air, so that moisture gets burned out of the gas grill. I didn't do that on the gas grill. Again, higher temperatures, it's an unnecessary risk, I think, to go high temperatures. I did have a guy that put his on his gas grill and forgot about it, burned the entire tank of propane. He said he thought it was about 500 degrees. It ran for about 6 hours. I said, how'd it come out? And he goes, man, it's fantastic. It looks great. It's rock hard. I'm like, well, okay, good to know. But I don't recommend it. I get a lot of questions about Japan dryers. You'll see in the hardware stores on the shelf a Japan dryer. It looks like a can of linseed oil, blue. Jasco, whoever makes it, says Japan dryer. And you can read about that online. And it is more of the same agents that are added to linseed oil to produce what they call boiled linseed oil. All right? They're chemical dryers that help the linseed oil polymerize or harden. So can you just add Japan dryers and not put the plane in the oven? The answer is yes. But your envelope of success is thinner than a sheet of paper. It is, I've done it successfully once on part of a plane. Right? Because what happens is the Japaning starts to cure so fast, it skins over. on the outside, and now you've got these volatile organic compounds, the turpentine, that can't escape from the Japanning because it's trapped by the metal underneath, and now it's trapped by the skin on the top of the Japanning where the oxygen polymerized it really fast, and it just starts to wrinkle up, and you will not be happy with the finish. So I've played with that. I've got a can of Japan dryer, and I never could get success on cast iron to the point that I could ever recommend it. Now, if you're Japanning wood, absolutely, because the VOCs will escape through the wood. I have Japanned a lot of wood objects because I wanted to find out, they Japanned Model Ts, the spokes on the wheels were Japanned, whatever, the trim on the windows was Japanned. So my old shop, it was a historic home and had wooden doorknobs that looked terrible. So I stripped them down and Japanned them. They look great. And they were fine 4 years later, they still look good. So yeah, you can use it. Japan dryers on wood, but not on metal. Okay, so yeah, the highlights. It is a sandable primer. If you have a rough casting, or if you've got any imperfection as you're moving along in your Japanning, sand it down and just apply, wipe it down with turpentine or acetone. I think is sometimes better, but wipe it down to remove any of the dust. Put another coat of Japanning on and just keep going. It works great as a sandable primer. You're just improving the finish. Build up the coats. You're not going to do it in 2 coats. I guarantee it. You're not going to get it done in 2 coats. It's going to take at least 3. Aim for 4. Put it on. If you plan on 4, you might stop at 3, but you'll be real happy. Go slow and steady. The golden cast. Well, I don't know if it's the cast iron itself or if it's something that the Japan outgasses, but you'll find that your surfaces of your plane will have kind of a lightly yellow, slightly gold, very faint cast to them. After you heat cure it, you can buff that off with a shop rag or a super fine Scotch-Brite or something like that. It comes off quite easily, but you will notice it. Don't be worried about it. It comes off. Just rub it off when you're done. Lastly, I guess, oops, right? The number one thing that you don't want to do, and that I never wanted anybody to experience, is to have to go back and fully strip the plane down and start over. Particularly before we found out that citrus strip helped. Because prior to that, people were stripping them down with like Dremel tools and little wire brushes, and it takes hours and hours. And I never wanted somebody to have to go through that. And I didn't mind learning and doing it because I could strip it back down in 10 minutes in my media blaster. So I tried to come up with a process that had a wide range of success. And if you follow those steps, I've never had anybody have to strip one down. So you should get a good result. Considerations, right? We talked about, not every plane was Japanned. Not every Stanley plane was Japanned. Sometime, I'm guessing, I don't have any solid date on this, around World War II, Japanning pretty much disappeared and everything went to enamel. But Bacon enamel, high quality enamels, they're great finishes, they're very durable. Miller's Falls were never Japanned. So if you're trying to be traditional and you want to restore the original finish, don't Japan your Miller's Falls plane. It was enameled. If you've got a Type 19 Stanley, it was enameled. So if you've got, a World War II era plane, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm not a big Stanley collector, so I really don't know. I can tell you that Sargent pretty much Japanned theirs until the bitter end, but they quit building planes long before Stanley did. So just some considerations of what you're working on. The color, if it's not black, maybe don't Japan it. If you're really industrious, if you're like James and you just can't stand not trying something, you can get that whatever pigment you want. Get them artist molar, the glass molar and the plate, and mold that stuff down really. There's a gentleman that we know, Rafael Herrera. He has done this and he got outstanding results when he molded the pigments down. So it definitely works, but it's a lot more work. Thickness and smoothness. I'm not sure what I left that up there for. One of the ways you can tell if a plane's been spray painted or Japanned is look at any of the lettering, the details on the casting. They're just a little too crisp. Japanning, with that way it self-levels, it just softens any sharp edges on the plane. So around the lettering, inside the letter O on the side, like a number 10 or whatever, you'll see the Japanning kind of piled up in there. You can get the same effect with spray paint if you put a lot of coats on. And you can definitely get that effect. I'm just not a big spray paint fan because I found it was just not very durable. Mark Webster used to spray all of his planes, and then he started having trouble with it. Rust-Oleum changed their colors and he couldn't get a really good black. And he called them and he was talking to them about it and he asked them about heat curing their paint. And they said, don't do it, it's not made for it. He said, it will not bond any better if you heat cure our spray paint. It may be worse. It's not an automotive enamel. All right, so if you want to heat cure your spray paint, you might be accelerating the curing a little bit, but you're not making it any tougher. If you've got the spray equipment and you want to buy automotive enamel, which is expensive paint, you'll get a great finish and it'll be on there, it won't turn loose. And epoxy paints, there are 2-part epoxy paints. So you have to add the catalyst to the paint, it's a one-time deal. Very durable, very durable. It is a way to go, but it's expensive.
Do you have to Japan on a raw cast iron, or could you Japan over a powder coat?
I've never tried it. I would be concerned about Japanning over powder coat because powder coat is a plastic. When they heat cure the powder, you're basically melting it into a solid surface. And you heat powder coating for between 10 and 15 minutes at about 400 degrees, maybe 450. So I don't know what long-term exposure to the heat necessary to cure the Japanning would do to the powder coat. Might very well blister you. Now, could you Japan over existing Japanning? Yes, you can, absolutely. Just clean it really well, some turpentine and then some acetone, and you can lay Japanning down on top of Japanning. But keep in mind, if you've got some chips, they're going to be black and they're going to be nice and shiny and glossy like the rest of the Japanning, but they're still going to have an outline of the chip because they're going to be at a different elevation, right? There's not as many coats. If you try to build up the coats, you're building it up, you're kind of going across the edge, and now you have a bit of a bump. Yes, you can sand that down, and then finally put one final coat over the whole plane, and that's how you fix a chip in Japanning. But at that point, why don't you just Japan the whole plane? It's a little less work. So in conclusions, can you do it? I have been stunned by the number of people that have bought Japanning and have Japan planes and send me pictures, and they're just stunning every time. They're just stunning. And there's a couple folks out there that have started doing it on commission. I did them for a while, I just don't have the time anymore. So if you want your plane Japan and you don't want to do it yourself, MMSI Toolworks, Nate, I can't remember Nate's last name, I've got it in my notes here. He does planes on commission, he does fantastic work. He is now mixing his own Japanning using my recipes. I supplied him with Japanning for a long time, and I can highly recommend it. So you can also search MMSI Toolworks and you'll find his contact information. So yeah, he'll Japan a plane for you, you'll be very, very happy with it. But can you? Absolutely. It is really actually a pretty simple process. It's idiot-proof enough for anybody that's a woodworker. If you're a woodworker, you're already not an idiot. You know how to use tools, you've got hand skills. So it's well within your capabilities. Should you do it? That's entirely up to you. I'm never going to criticize somebody that spray paints a plane and is happy with it. I don't care if it's blue, James. Hey, it's great. It's your tool, your rules, right? I Japan mine simply because I wanted to learn about it. I kind of felt like I wanted to try to restore an original finish. How did they do it? And, how does it perform? All that kind of stuff. The last 2 planes I brought here, a pair of Stanley scrub planes. The one with the beechwood handles, I restored. It was a rusty mess. It's fully Japan. The one with the rosewood handles is original. So you can compare the finishes. Can you do it? Absolutely, you can do it. You can mix your own if you want. I will tell you, it's a little easier to buy it. I don't care if you buy Pontypool. There was another guy making Japanning for a while and selling it. He's not anymore. Like I said, I sell it. By the time it's shipped to you, it's about $25 with shipping for a can of Japanning. To get it to you, I'll ship it to you anywhere. You only need 1 can unless you're going to do a couple hundred planes. And just buy 1 can and then buy another when you need it because you don't want it sitting around for 2 years. Although I think it's got a really good shelf life. I pack it with argon gas. So it's packed in a vacuum bag, so it'll probably sit on your shelf for 15 years and still be good. And there's, like I said, if you go to the website, aplanelife.us, there's blogs in there with guides on how to mix Japanning, how to apply Japanning. There's recordings of my seminars, which were 3 days long, a day of plane preparation, an hour of plane prep, an hour of mixing Japanning, an hour of applying Japanning. You certainly can go watch those videos. All the information's there. You'll find some subtle differences. I haven't updated those videos in a while, so you'll hear me mention a little bit lower temperatures. I said I used to recommend 350. That's in the videos. I now tell you 400. You'll find that in the written material. And you can find me on Facebook. You can email me at aplanelife.us@gmail.com. I'm more than happy to answer questions. I'm more than happy to jump on a video call and look at your plane and your problem or whatever it is and try to help you be successful. I enjoy people being able to kind of use a traditional finish and have some success with it, put a smile on your face. I mix and sell Japanning only because there's no other easy way to get it, and it's a hobby business, I can tell you that. It's not making me any money, but that's okay, I have fun doing it. So. Questions? Yes, sir?
Do you ever do any, you talk about wood, you talk about some of the other things you've done. Have you done precision tools like starrett levels or starrett squares or any of those things?
Yeah, no, I haven't. I have japanned a lot of like antique door hinges. We live in historic homes, brick homes. So if you've ever seen put rods through them and stars on the end to hold the house, I've japanned all those on our house. What else have I japanned? But no, I have not done a precision tool. As long as you're not applying it to a working surface of that tool, you certainly won't have any problem with it affecting accuracy. I would be up to you and maybe Tom Dickey, or more experienced machinists, to work through the thought process of what would the heat cycle do to my tool. I don't know. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Do you have a name for anyone doing powder coating?
No, I know, like I said, Mark Webster does powder coating, but he does full plane refurbishment. He would probably powder coat a plane for you if you send it to him. You could talk to him about it. He's usually got 10 or 15 planes he's working on, but he'd probably work it in. And he has a media blaster. He is more capable. He's fully capable of stripping it down, and he would just tell you what it would cost. And he's working for pennies. He's passionate about doing it. Whatever he charges you, I guarantee he's not making more than about a penny an hour doing it, but he does really good work. You're going to incur shipping costs, of course, he's in California, in fact. But you can find Mark Webster on Instagram. Does anybody know it's like Birdman?
Webster 51, I believe.
What is it?
M. Webster 51.
That's it, M. Webster 51. If you don't have Instagram and you have grandkids or kids, just have them message Mark for you. Or you could send me an email and I could probably get you his email address and you could reach out to Mark. He's a real perfectionist. So I've got a full set of Type 7 Stanley Bailey planes that he fully restored for me. They're all equipped with Hawk irons. I've got all the original irons and stuff, but they're users, and man, they are incredible. They rival my Clifton planes in performance for a Bailey plane. But, any other questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned occasionally having to sand it.
Mm-hmm.
Is the dust as ubiquitous as the fresh?
It's not, thankfully. It's not. Yeah. When you sand the Japanning, it's not the mess that the raw asphaltum is. So no, it's not bad at all. It's no worse than sanding a piece of hardwood. And you just, again, wipe it off with some turpentine and then some acetone before you start Japanning again, because you don't want any of that dust to get picked up in your new finish, and you're good to go. So yeah.
If you do the third and fourth coat, is that also 2 hours at 400?
It is. Yeah, it's the same process every time. It's 2 at 190 and 2 at 4 hours. So it's always, every coat of paint is going to take you 4 hours of curing time. You don't have to cool it down in between. That was the original recommendations by the guy that was doing tinware and all that. You had to let it completely cool. And nope, at the end of 2 hours, I just go over to my oven and I turn it up to 225 or 250, and I let it heat up a little slowly, go up to like 300, give it 15 minutes, finally get up to 400. You don't want to just go ramping up the heat on a piece of cast iron. I just don't think it's a good practice. Probably never be a problem, but why risk it? But you don't have to let it cool down. Yeah, it just doesn't seem like a good idea to heat up a piece of metal really fast, you know. I've never had a casting warp at all. Like I said, these things went through a heat cycle when they were japanned originally. So unless it has undergone something unusual in its lifetime, it's not going to be a problem when you heat cure it.
Did you say you have to cure it between each coat? You say you're curing it?
Yes, you cure each coat, yeah. Yeah, I originally was not curing each coat, but what happens is you get too much drag on the brush, and the previous coat, you'll scuff it, and then it won't self-level anymore. You'll put brush marks in the semi-cured coat that's sitting there that started to harden very slowly, and then you'll have permanent brush marks. So you cure each coat as you go along.
So it takes more than a day to do a whole one?
Yeah.
A lot of time.
Yeah, it's a 2-day process. But out of that 2 days, I'm spending about 1 hour actually doing something. The other time it's just sitting in the oven, with a timer going, oh yeah, I gotta go turn the oven up, or go turn it off or whatever. Or like a little toaster oven, I just set it for 2 hours and it went off on its own. So you're spending about 15 minutes applying the Japanning, and then it's out of sight, out of mind. So, but it's not instant. A little patience. Any other questions?
Bill, could you put back to your original so it's easy to copy all of the
Yeah.
information?
I can try.
You're first. Yeah.
Here we go.
Oh, I didn't know you had to do that one.
I don't know. It's probably a faster way, but I'm not a wizard. Maybe
That's it,
that.
right there.
There you go. Thank you. Good call.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that's all I got. That's all I got.
30 seconds left.